Hello there, Algebra students. This is Mr. Kashi speaking. This is our second video on 10.3, solving quadratic equations. I just want to go through a few examples on how to solve quadratic equations using square roots. So we have our first equation is 2x squared minus 98 equals 0. Now this seems like a little bit more complicated problem than what we should be starting off with, but if you can remember, if we want to find our x-intercepts, we need to plug in 0 for y. So if you remember, you have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We're taking out the b term, but we're plugging in 0 for y. So whatever number we find for the x's is going to be our solutions. So if you can remember, we draw a line here, and whatever we do on one side of the equation, we do on the other side, and we're going to be using inverse operations. So here I'm going to add 98 on both sides, and 0 plus 98 equals 98, obviously. Then we're going to divide by 2. If you need a calculator, go ahead and do that. But we have x squared equals 98 divided by 2 is 49. Okay, and then we have to make sure that we take the square root of both sides. And so we're taking the square root of both sides. And remember, we're not only using the positive, but the negative as well. So there's two solutions for this. We have positive 7 and negative 7. Then moving down to this next example here, you can see we have 2g squared plus 32 equals 0. Very, very close to what we had before. We have a g instead of an x, plus instead of a minus. So here, draw our line. We subtract 32 from both sides. We have 2g squared equals negative 32. Then remember, this is multiplied, 2 times g squared. So we're going to divide by 2 on both sides. So we have g squared equals a negative 16. Now, you can do this a couple of different ways. Think of a number that multiplies by itself to get negative 16. Or if you take the square root of negative 16 in your calculator, more than likely you're going to get an error. So there is not one number that you can multiply by itself to get a negative. So whenever you take the square root of a negative, you know that you have no solution. So you want to be, a giveaway is usually the addition sign, but you want to follow the problem all the way through to make sure that that ends up being true. So I do want to go through two more here. Some of you might be able to do this one in your head. If you think about just, well, I have to add 25 on both sides, and I get t squared equals 25, and then when I take the square root of both sides, I don't just get positive 5, but I get negative 5 as well. And then finally, I want to spend a little bit more time on this last one here. It doesn't start out with 0. It's actually done partly for us, but that doesn't change. I still need to solve for n. I want to try to get n alone. So I'm going to subtract 12 on both sides, and here I get 3n squared equals 0. Then when I divide by 3 on both sides, I still get 0. So I get n squared equals 0, and I square both sides. Let's take the square root of both sides, excuse me. And then I don't have to really do the positive and the negative of 0. Because there's no such thing as a positive or negative 0. So in this case, we just have one solution, and that solution would be 0. So there's a couple of examples of how to solve quadratic equations using square roots. It might be beneficial to go back and review the perfect squares so you know them, not have to plug them into your calculator. But there should be an IXL or worksheet to work on after you conclude these notes.